but my name is Ayo Duyile. I'm from the DC metropolitan area, specifically PG County. I went to Temple University, so Philly is my second home. I know a lot of people in here are based in Philly as well too. So shout out to all of you. Temple, I studied computer science, and then I went to Drexel University and got my engineering project management degree as well too. My first role straight out of school was actually a software automation test engineer for Lockheed Martin. Then I kind of pivoted into more of deep tech, working as a product developer for Facebook, product manager at Microsoft, and currently as a senior technical product manager at Google as well too. As of recent, I was awarded 30 under 30 alumni for Temple University. So once again, it's all coming full circle. And now I'm an adjunct professor at Temple University as well too. So if you guys are interested in learning more about product management, sign up for my course this fall as well with Temple University. I am the co-founder of a tech nonprofit and community organization called Techsgiving. We'll talk more about them later as well too, but we're focused on providing the tools and resources for underrepresented communities to break into tech of all ages across the globe. And I am the co-founder of Backdoor Tech, which is a tech consulting service which provides career coaching, resume reviews, and other things as well too. So that's a lot. Whenever I read these things off, I realize how much I have on my plate. But as one of my good friends says, you're overwhelmed with blessings, and I'm thankful to be in this position. Next slide. All right. So today's objective, we want to understand what tokenism is, how harmful it is, and what you can do to recognize the impact of it in your own organization as well too. Next slide. Before we dive in, I want to know what your definition of tokenism is. So does anybody have any definitions? Don't hesitate to come on camera and tell us what your definition is. If not, dump them in the chat and I'm looking for them right now. Representation without support, that's a great definition right there. Diversity hires just to check a box. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that for sure. What else we got? Come on, keep them coming. Any more? Being at the table with no real power. Oh yeah, that's a really good one. Here we come. Saying one thing, but not supporting it with action. Love that. Having one person of a marginalized group to prove you are diverse, preferably one who identifies with the dominant power structure. Ooh, that's a good one. Very good one. You got any last minute submissions? Well, all right, these are great definitions. And I want to go into, before we go into the definition of tokenism, you all did great. I want to just give my experience with tokenism. So when I was straight out of school, I actually worked for a company where I was the only Black software engineer. At the time I was like, this is pretty cool. I'm fresh out of school. I'm, a software engineer making good money. And, this is just awesome. And the company actually reached out to me to work with them on campus recruiting as well too. They had a ton of different partnerships and contracts with HBCUs. So I'm like, this is awesome. I can pay it forward. I can go to all the HBCUs and, kind of just, bridge that gap as well too. So as I was out there, went to so many different lovely HBCUs. Shout out to Howard University, shout out to Norfolk State, shout out to BSU as well too, Hampton University as well. I would go out there and we would do the same old thing, talk to so many different talented, underrepresented individuals who are looking for their first big break in tech. And I also sat on the interview process. So weeks would go by, months would go by, and I would notice that with none of these people that I met at these hiring events would actually make it into the interview round. And obviously there were no offers extended as well too. So after months went by, I realized that this was an act of tokenism, essentially just to check a box to say, hey, we were here. Hey, we were present. Hey, we showed up. And I didn't realize that I actually had a part in that as well too. And that actually left me with a bad taste in my mouth. And I ultimately left the hiring team for this reason, and ultimately left the company because of this reason as well too. So this is my experience with tokenism. And I think this is something that we can all relate to in some form or fashion, where your company shows face but doesn't truly show up. And I want to know if anybody has ever experienced anything like this. Anybody can relate to this. We can get some emojis going in the chat, just some thumbs up emojis if you guys can relate to this as well too. That's awesome. I'm glad, I know I'm not the only one. I'm glad that this is an inclusive space where we can all just be open and talk about this as well too. All right, next slide. All right, so we're gonna go into tokenism, but I wanna talk about the tech diversity issue. I think if you guys are on this call and on this seminar, you guys understand that there is a diversity issue in tech, right? So I'm gonna read off these stats, but I think you guys are fairly familiar with the overall problem, right? So 5 and 7% of Black and Latinx representation in the tech space, while they account for 13 and 18% of the US population. That's a crazy disproportion right there, right? We've got to do something to bridge that gap. Next, tech and computer science industries have the lowest rates of women, Black, Latinx, and Native American participants out of all the STEM focuses. What does that mean? Out of all the STEM focuses, people are actively pursuing jobs or actually landing jobs in tech at the lowest rate as well too, right? So there's a gap that needs to be filled. The number of technical employees who identify as Black and Latinx from FANG companies is less than 3%. I have worked at my fair share of FANG companies, and I can attest that this is a very, very real stat. I often go into rooms, I often go into meetings, I often go and meet with people who I collaborate heavily with, and I don't see people that look like me. So this is something that's very, very prevalent in tech, but specifically in FANG as well too. Only 25% of tech jobs are held by women. However, women are over 50% of the US population, right? So that tells you that there's something that needs to be done, that there's a crazy disproportion that needs to be fixed. And lastly, over 90% of tech executives are white and Asian males, right? So when you look up at the top of many of these tech companies, you're not gonna see somebody who is diverse. You're not gonna see somebody who, in my case, looks like me as well too. And the saddest part about all these statistics is the longer that you stay in the industry, you become numb to this as well too. And we can't become numb to this, because once you become numb to it, change doesn't happen. So we have to really, really be proactive in learning these gaps and ultimately solving the issues behind these gaps as well too. Next slide. So now that we know the numbers, let's talk about why they're not diverse. So I always like to talk about this, because part of the reason why tech companies don't have representation is because they don't have representation. And what does that mean? That means the fact that I don't see somebody that looks like me discourages me from even applying to the company, pursuing a role at that company as well too, right? So it's kind of just a cyclical effect, right? Where if I don't see anybody who looks like me, I'm discouraged to even join, right? I do think there's a small change that's happening where we're actually learning that, hey, this person did make it into big tech. Hey, this person does have a prominent role and is making an impact at tech as well too, right? But we have to continue to push forward as well there too. There's an unequal amount of growth opportunities in tech. I think we've all heard this before, but when you look at the pay gap from BIPOC professionals, specifically in tech, it is astonishing. And this discourages people from even joining tech, where they can pursue other things and other endeavors that they could have better growth opportunities for as well too. One of the biggest things is there's a lack of role models, right? Whenever you join a company, you always, you tend to look at the top, right? You tend to want to see somebody that looks like you. So thinking about your CEOs, I want to ask everybody here, how many Black tech CEOs are there in the Fortune 500? I want to just take a wild guess how many there are. That is correct. There are zero Black tech CEOs in the Fortune 500, male or woman, right? And when you think about Latinx, there's only 5. So that is something that is very discouraging for somebody who is diverse and wants to break into tech, but they see that there's no true growth, or there's no ladder for them to be that person that has a prominent role in the company as well too. And then lastly, cultural biases in the workspace and overall work culture are just things that don't seem inclusive as well too. I know there's a lot of people in here. I know, when I first started with my first company, people would always ask the question after a weekend ends, so what did you do this weekend? My weekend, I would always say, just chilled, watch sports, very, very quiet, right? Meanwhile, my weekend was definitely the opposite of that. I was probably out and about, having a good time, probably at a bar, so on and so forth. But you just don't know if you can really show up as your true self, right? And sometimes when you don't have the opportunity to show up as your true self, it makes it very, very tough to want to go back to that place from a day-to-day perspective. It makes you tough to even want to join a place like that as well, too. So we need to make sure that we have an environment that's inclusive, an environment where people feel safe to be at their whole selves as well, too. Next slide. All right. So you guys already answered this as well, too, but let's dive a little bit deeper, right? What is tokenism? The formal definition of tokenism is the policy or practice of making only a symbolic effort. So I have a question for you guys. I want to know, can you guys think of any external examples? You don't have to put your company on the spot. We're not doing that here. Can you all think of any external examples of tokenism that you've seen, maybe in the tech space, maybe just in general? Let us know in the chat. We'll take a little time for this. Nobody has anything? Okay. Juneteenth branding. That is a big one. That is a big one. Very good call out right there. Seeing some diversity in hiring entry level, but zero representation in leadership. Another big one. Rainbow washing. That's a big one as well, too. My org after George Floyd's murder announced a search for a CDO. Exactly, right? You know, very reactionary, but not proactive, right? So that's a very good call out as well, too. Do we have any others? Hiring a DEI recruiter, but giving them no voice or budget. Oof, let's talk about it. Not giving them any type of way to have influence or providing them with the resources or set up for failure, which is a big act of tokenism. When companies are in trouble, they tend to decide that that's the time to hire someone who is diverse, essentially passing off a failing company to a diverse person. I like that. That's a very good call out right there, right? Usually diversity gets pushed when there's, you know, the feathers are getting ruffled or there's some sort of turmoil, right? Rather than pushing it early and often. Events that support DEI, but no policies to back up or support these employees. We'll talk about that as well, too. That's another good call out. So these are all really good. I think we can go, unfortunately, I think we can go very, very deep into the acts and examples of tokenism. But let's dive a little bit deeper. So next slide. All right. So tokenism, again, there is a push for diversity, but usually it ends up showing as tokenism, right? So one big way to discern the two, tokenism is performative and action driven, right? So an example, going back to my experience with tokenism and me being on the recruitment team, right? Us pretty much just showing up to these HBCUs and saying, hey, we're here, you know, we're smiling, we're talking to people, we're accepting resumes. But after that, there was no action, right? We didn't invite them to hiring days. Mind you, I was sitting on hiring days every Friday, and none of these people that I was meeting at these events were actually making it to hiring days, right? So that's performative and very action driven, very just to say, okay, we've checked the box, we did what we came here to do, right? But diversity is empathetic and results driven, right? So in the case of my experience, right, empathy would have, you know, been focused on, or results driven would have been focused on, hey, let's actually, you know, have a set number of people that actually make it into the actual interview rounds, right? Let's say that, you know, we're actually going to make sure that X, Y, and Z amount gets hired as well too, or making sure that you're at least taking a foot forward to make sure that people are actually given a fair opportunity rather than just showing up somewhere, is ways that you can kind of validate results as well too, right? So those are some of the red flags, if you will, of tokenism. And that's how to discern it from the diversity. Some of the common forms of general tokenism include company marketing and branding material. There's so many times where you'll see a company making a push for hiring, and then all of a sudden, on the back end that this company is not diverse at all, but all of a sudden you have all different races, all different types of people that are branded on their marketing material, right? That's a form of tokenism right there. Again, somebody brought this up with the symbolic diversity hires, right? Thinking about not only how you have to, you should be focused on diversity, but actually putting these people in positions to have an impact and be successful at your organization, right? Hiring is just the tip of the iceberg, right? But having an impact on these companies is the next step as well too. And sometimes it just stops at the hiring, and that's when it just becomes symbolic, and ultimately that's just tokenism, right? And again, this is an extension of the second one, right? Lack of support for roles focused on diversity and inclusion, right? There's so much D&I talk these days, I would say specifically within the last 2 years, especially around George Floyd. However, there's a lack of support, right? There's kind of just like, okay, do something. We've hired, now do something with it, right? There's no guidance given. There's no resources given. There's ultimately a feeling that you're set up to fail, and you're set up to just kind of stay in the corner and just look good for statistics, right? So these are the things that you kind of want to be cognizant of when you're looking out for tokenism. And then lastly, the subtle use of diverse personnel as the voice of community, right? Whenever there's a problem that arises, or whenever there's a need to have a diverse voice, you call upon, that one person, or the choose from that barren bucket of diverse personnel to be the voice of community, right? That's another sign of tokenism. And these are some of the things that we definitely want to make sure companies are being held accountable for. And ultimately we want to eradicate that in the tech industry and that as a whole as well. Next slide. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into some examples of tokenism in tech, right? So I think we all remember this. A few years back, George Floyd happened, and a lot of different companies, but tech companies especially, were just posting black squares during BLM protests, right? However, this was just very empty. Right? There was so much more that could have been done, so much more impact that could have been made. However, this was just something that was just being an empty thing that's done because it was trendy, right? That's an example of tokenism, right? We talked about the promotion of diversity ERGs. However, they don't have a lack of funding, right? So you set you say that you want to have a community of diverse personnel. However, you don't give them the actual funding for them to actually build this community, right? To have events, to come together in a safe space as well too, right? Again, so this is just kind of a token expression of, okay, we've done something, now you carry it the rest of the way, right? That is not how you set a company up for diversity. This is just an example of tokenism as well too, right? And you'll see this very often, hiring a diversity council, but they have no diversity in the actual leadership positions, right? There are so many tech companies specifically where they'll have a D&I council, and this person will look like a person of color or a woman, but then you look at the rest of their leadership positions and flat out it is straight white or Asian male. That's about it, right? Across the board, right? And that is just simply not cutting it at the end of the day, right? And then lastly, companies that are focused on diverse hiring numbers, but they don't retain them as well too. And I think this is the biggest one that I kind of want to talk about, right? Because there's such a push for people to break into tech, and there's such a movement for Black in tech, or diverse in tech, and I love that. But we're talking about people landing roles when we should really be talking about people thriving in these roles and staying in these roles as well too. And some of this is on the personnel, but a lot of this is actually on the company's culture as well too. A lot of these companies are looking to check boxes and say, hey, we've hired this amount of people from this diverse background. We hit our goal, right? That is tokenism, right? How long are these people staying there? Are they staying there for 6 months? Are they staying there for 9 months? Are they staying there for a year? If that's the case, then that's something you need to worry about as well too, right? How long are they staying? Are they staying from 3 to 5 years? That should be more of a metric of success rather than how much you've hired, but how much you've retained as well too, right? And that's the sign. And for as a product manager, a key performance indicator that your company is doing something right is not how well you can bring people in, is how long they can stay, and ultimately how much they can grow in your company as well too. And this is something that we're seeing in the tech industry now, where they're just looking to hire but not retain. Next slide. All right. So when you're thinking about diversity versus tokenism, I want you to think about these certain red flags, right? When you're thinking about diversity, think about inclusive spaces, right? Think about a place where you feel safe, a place where you feel like I can show up and be my true self, right? And I'll be honest, I don't think I have found that personally myself in tech. I've worked for a lot of different companies, and that's part of the reason why I started Techsgiving, because ultimately I wanted to feel like I could be myself around tech professionals, right? And this is a sign of a lack of diversity, right? So again, tokenism, on the other hand, is filling quotas. Well, we have this amount of people here. However, they don't feel like they can show up as their true selves again. So that's a red flag right there, right? Impact versus optics, right? So a lot of times, when something goes awry or there's social injustices, tech companies will be on the forefront saying how they feel about a certain topic, right? However, they're not doing this or practicing whatever they say they're preaching at that certain moment 24/7, right? Why is it only when there is a social injustice or police brutality where a tech company wants to talk about diversity? Why can't it be 24/7? Why can't there always be a push for that? Why is there not programs in place in your company already that focus on diverse hiring, that focus on diverse pipelines into young talent, so we can strengthen the tech pipeline for diverse hires as well too, right? So this is kind of the impact versus optics thing that kind of shows diversity versus tokenism. And then, like I talked about before, signs of consistent team growth and retention, right? If you are making a certain amount of hires annually, specifically for diverse professionals, however, these people are leaving after year, then ultimately this is not solving the problem. This just actually is helping illuminate the problem that your company is not a very inclusive company, right? So when you think about that, think about how long people are staying, specifically people of color are staying at your company, or women are staying at your company, as opposed to how many people you're hiring as well too. And then lastly, leadership across all areas are as diverse as the general population as well too, right? There are so many different talented people out there, diverse individuals who don't have opportunities to truly flourish in leadership positions, right? However, you'll see that, yes, we've hired this amount, right, at an entry-level rate, and there's nothing wrong with entry-level hires, but we expect more, we want to have leadership positions, we strive for more as well too, right? And this is something that we want to see reflected in your leadership as well too. So think about your respective companies. Think about how diverse the leadership is there. Can you think of a woman that is your CTO? Can you think of a woman that's your CMO? Can you think of a woman that's your CEO or on the board of your company? A lot of times you have to think long and hard about that. But if I ask you conversely, how many men are in leadership positions in your company? How many white men or white Asian men are leading your company right now? I think that would be an easier question for you to answer as well too, right? And these are some of the red flags when it comes to diversity versus tokenism. All right, so I've been barking about tokenism and diversity for a long time, but I want you guys to understand that this embracing diversity isn't just a kumbaya thing or just something that's good, just from a humanity perspective, right? This is actually the key to a sustainable organization, right? So one, when you have diversity in an organization, you are going to increase your employee retention right now, right, too. So I think one of the big things with tech is that there is a lot of people job hopping, right? And this, I won't say this will solve the entire problem with that, but this will make this, specifically, I know me personally, this would make this a lot harder for me to jump from a different company if I knew that this was an inclusive organization, right? If I knew that I felt like I can come there as my holistic self every day, it makes it a lot tougher for me to leave to another company when I know that I'm going to be at risk to deal with lack of diversity issues as well too, right? Again, inclusive teams mean inclusive products, which ultimately mean larger profits for the company as well too, right? When you think about many of these tech companies, their focus is growth, right? And when you think about growth, you have to think about tapping into different markets and different arenas as well too. And to tap into many different markets, you have to think about how you have inclusive products and products that fit the needs of many different user bases as well too, right? The key to this is by you having an inclusive team where you can have people that are represented from all different cultures, all different walks of life. So ultimately, this is fed into your product as well too, right? So in short, if you have an inclusive team, your product is going to grow much faster than that of a team that is less inclusive or less diverse as well too, right? And then thinking about the creativity as well too, right? When you have like-minded individuals, this sometimes can be more harm than good in a sense, right? Where sometimes you don't catch things in terms of blind spots and things of that nature, or sometimes you don't have good input for somebody who is a part of the user base that you're trying to serve as well too, right? So when you have that creative mix up of people from all different walks of life, this is ultimately going to increase, again, larger profits, more impact as well too, right? So you want your meetings to be people challenging each other from different backgrounds as well too. You don't want it to just be, yes, this is great. No, you want people challenging each other, different ways of thinking. Ultimately, this is going to enhance your product, and this is going to enhance your experience, your user experience of the product. And it, again, this ties back into the bottom line as well too. And then the last two, it's much easier for your company to expand as well too, right? Thinking about some of the companies that are doing well globally, not just domestically, are some of the companies that are getting diversity right, as opposed to companies that are lacking diversity as well too, right? So when you think about how you're hiring or how you're ultimately growing, are you making sure that, yes, I want to expand to Africa, but are you hiring African talent? Yes, I want to expand to South America, but are you hiring South American talent as well too? So thinking about that ultimately makes it easier for your company to expand as well too, and it ultimately improves the culture. So I have a question for you all. I'd like to know what's your why for creating authentic diversity with your company, right? Are you guys actively doing that? So what's the reason for you as leaders in your company, as people who are aspiring to break into tech, or just people who are, generally want to see diversity? What's your reason for creating authentic diversity? So let's use the chat for this one. Okay, better results and better culture. Yeah, that's a good one. Better results and better culture. Let's keep them coming. Personal experiences, feeling like I couldn't be myself among white male time. Oof, that's a good one too. So many reasons, but for one, I want my workplace to accurately reflect my community. Love that. We want to look like the customers we serve in the real estate technology space. Love it. Reflecting the demographics of our clients and our staff. Building a culture of innovation and inclusivity. Love it. These are all great ones as well too. And I think whatever your why is, just make sure that's always at the top of the mind as you guys are looking to grow your companies, or you guys are looking to have an impact within your company as well too. So thank you guys for answering. All right. Next slide. All right. So the future of diversity in tech, right? We've talked a lot about tokenism, and now we've talked about, how diversity combats tokenism. But where is diversity in tech today, and what does the future look like, right? So FANG companies are showing an average of 2% growth for Black, Latinx, and women in the workforce, right? So what that ultimately means is that there are slow baby steps being taken, right? And again, we understand that this is a long game. We need, FANG, and I apologize for that. FANG is, well, formerly Facebook, which is now Meta, so it should really be Mang, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So these are what is comprised of, I would say, some of the largest tech companies in the world. And these are usually the companies that, people look at specifically when it comes to diversity as what should be the beacon for diversity. However, that's very arguable, but these are just some of the largest tech companies in the world. And again, so FANG companies are showing an average of 2% growth for Black, Latinx, and women in the workforce, right? So this ultimately means that there's slow growth, but we will take that over no growth, or actually receding growth as well too. Next is an increased remote work. Increase in remote work creates opportunities for historically underrepresented communities as well too, right? So there has been a shift thanks to the pandemic in the last 2 years, where remote work has created opportunities for people who couldn't make the commute to a place where they, just simply couldn't work, right? Ultimately, this is actually working in the favor of historically underrepresented communities as well too. I know specifically during the pandemic, there was actually a survey taken for mothers, and most women cited the fact that they wanted to be at home with their children as they were learning as well too, and they wouldn't want to go back to the office as well too, right? So this makes it actually levels the playing field out a little bit more, where people who are traditionally marginalized or don't have the access to things to actually still participate in the tech space, while still being able to be in their own communities that they want to be in as well too, right? Many people, I know myself, I had to move out to Silicon Valley to kind of get my big break into tech, right? And this was because I was a young professional. I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids or anything like that. But many people aren't in those kind of positions as well too. So they have to make a tough choice. And ultimately this sometimes can discourage people from breaking into tech as well too. So now with the remote work, this is kind of balancing things out, and this looks better for diversity in tech as well too. Next slide. So now with talent shortages in the tech space, organizations are now being pressured to focus on reskilling and upskilling their current workforce, along with reskilling the potential future workforce as well too, right? There is a big push for apprenticeships, specifically in big tech, but across all of tech, right? So this is something that, again, kind of levels the playing field as well too, right? We're seeing more apprenticeships, people who don't require high school diplomas, who don't require high school diplomas or college degrees as well too, to break into tech as well too. So now historically marginalized communities are now giving a better shot to break into tech as well too. So this is something that plays better into the hand of diversity in tech. And now talent is now valuing diversity, inclusion, and culture as the second most important factor we're signing on as a company as well too, right? So when you think about the people that your talent wants to be around, they want to be around inclusive people. They want to be around diverse people. They want to be around a company that is culture focused and culture forward as well too, right? So when you're thinking about how to retain your top talent, you ultimately need to make sure that it's inclusive, not only for the people that have been there for a while, but also the people that are now breaking into tech as well too. And these stats, I will admit, have been a bit dated for the last couple of months, but a lot of these things do have the potential to change, right? We have a recession that is looming, and hiring is now slowing down in the tech space. And I have a question for you guys, for people who are, in the tech space, people who are movers and shakers in the tech space, are looking to break into tech. Do you all think that these trends will change? Do you all think that now we will see the diversity push kind of slow down along with the hiring and the looming recession? I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. Do you guys think ultimately with the recession coming up that the push for diversity in tech will change or slow down? All right. I'm worried that efforts towards D&I will decrease with the recession, even before I have received comments like only big companies need to worry about D&I, not small companies. There's quite a disconnect. You're right about that 100%, right? I think, there was a layoff from a major company, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago. And, this company, many of the layoffs were a part of the D&I group as well too, right? So it's definitely something that we want to observe and we should be cognizant of, because this does have a impact on how the future of tech looks. I think it will slow. That's fair. I want to say it won't change, but I do think companies will start to focus solely on oftentimes in recession, people go in a hermit mode, which means that they need to be cash positive, and things that aren't directly impacting their bottom line are things that typically tend to go as well too. All right. Unfortunately, D&I is low in priorities, and a shift like this provides an excuse for companies to shift focus from it, claiming there is not enough resources for it. Yep. Yeah. And, this seems to be the common thought. Seems like, obviously D&I is something that is lower in priority for many companies as well too. So I agree with everybody's thoughts here as well too. So thank you guys for your input there. I think, this is very new. This will be my first time, and I would imagine many people's first time experience a recession as an adult. And it'll be very interesting to see how companies are focusing on D&I while navigating the recession as well too. But to my earlier point, this is the time that you guys should be cognizant of what your respective company is doing or other companies are doing out there. Is there diversity going to shift? Are there diversity efforts going to shift tremendously, right? Is there still going to be some emphasis placed on diversity throughout all of the turmoil that's going to happen as well too, right? Because at the end of the day, we know the value that having diversity provides a company. So we need to ensure that regardless of a recession or not, diversity is still on the top of the mind of these companies as well too. So the action here is really just to be cognizant, be very, very critical of your company, what they're doing in the midst of this recession in regards to diversity as well too. Next slide. All right. So let's talk about some ways to hold our company accountable. I kind of gave you one, but let's go into another one. So one, you guys should definitely be asking your company about diversity reports. Many companies have this and they should share this with you guys. They share this publicly, but if they don't, definitely be proactive about asking about diversity reports. Like what, and when you get these diversity reports, definitely identify to see if there's changes coming, right? What's the retention rate of, the diversity hires? What is the hiring rate of people of diverse backgrounds as well too, right? These are some of the things that you want to look into, and ultimately analyze the future. What is the goal, right? What diversity numbers are they trying to hit year over year or in a 5-year span as well too? Then if there is no system of feedback specifically in regards to diversity, you should be creating one. And if there is one, making sure that you're actually proactively providing input there as well too, right? So thinking about ways that you can create surveys or ways that you can create thought groups or things of that nature to ultimately ensure that the top level of people at your respective organization hear you loud and clear. Understand that, when you have an issue, or not even when you have an issue, sometimes where you just have a sentiment that you want to get across, that they have a way to hear you, right? A lot of times, and I'll admit, a lot of times we as diverse professionals, we kind of just think that this is the way things have been, so these are the way things are going to go in the future. We kind of take our ball and just leave, right? We don't talk about it. We don't make any kind of proactive way to make a change. And this is a part of the problem as well too, right? So us making sure our voices are heard and speaking up is a part of some of the actions that we can take, whether it be a system of feedback like focus groups or even surveys and things of that nature as well too. And then the last two, you want to make sure that you're leveraging employee resource groups for building change communities, right? There's so much, I would imagine many companies have employee resource groups. If you don't, please inquire about starting one. But I think it's not simply enough to just have a resource group, right? But really making sure that this resource group is, one, being a true community and a beacon for people who are diverse specifically can come and be them true selves. And then two, where they can make changes in their community as well too. A lot of times, especially in tech, we'll have a large company come somewhere to a respective area and the community changes, right? But we as diverse professionals need to make sure that we are giving back and pouring into that community to make sure that people not only from that community know, one, there is a way to break into tech. There are people that look like you that have broken into tech. And then two, to make sure that to show the people in this community that, hey, we're not here to disrupt your community. We're here to be collaborators of your community and enhance it with you together as well too. And then lastly, finding, sorry about that. And then I think in combination with this as well too, and lastly, just making sure that you're finding leaders to lead this charge and be advocates as well too, right? It's not only on diverse people to be the change makers. It's also a part of the people who are the majority to be our advocates and to work with us in this change as well too. And how you know a company is getting that diversity right. One, you can analyze their employee retention. Again, making sure that you're seeing those numbers on a month-by-month basis or year-by-year basis as well too. Analyze their employee retention. That's how you'll know if they're getting their numbers right or wrong, right? Next, look around in your team. You know, are you seeing a change in diverse hires on your team? Are you seeing more people that look like you on your team as well too? After that, look up at the leadership. Same thing. Are you seeing a change in the hires? Are you seeing a change in leadership? Are you seeing more people that look like you at the leadership level as well too, right? And if you're not, from a month to month and a year to year perspective, that's when you know that the company is still not putting diversity at the forefront as well too. Next, are you seeing more culturally inclusive focused events, right? Are you seeing more spaces where you can feel like you can come at work and be more and be your true self as well too, right? This is a sign that companies are ultimately getting their diversity right. I don't think that everybody's going to have it's going to be a flip of the switch and you're ultimately going to feel like you'll be your full self the next day, right? But if there's even moments or spaces where you can feel like your full self, that is a step in the positive direction as well too. Next is increased funding and engagement from ERGs. Are ERGs simply underfunded and you can't have community events, or are you seeing an increase in funding and you are having more events and more opportunities and resources for this group as well too? And increasing opportunities for upskilling internal and external talent as well too, right? I talked a lot about the fact that there is a lack of diverse professionals in leadership positions, right? And one of the ways that we can solve this is by upskilling, right? What is your company doing to provide, resources or tools to upskill and bridge the gap, whether it be from a technical standpoint or whether that be from a soft skill standpoint, to make it to that leadership level as well too, right? This only provides value to the company because your company wants the top talent, right? So they should be investing in upskilling the talent as well too, right? And then lastly, just more pay transparency. Do I know what the person to the left and the right are making at this company? And if you don't, that leads to a lot of the disparity, across the industry and tech, which we're trying to solve right now as well. All right. So just some last takeaways, right? One, research your company's D&I strategies and goals, right? How many people in here, raise their hands, actually know their company's D&I strategy and goals? If you do, just put a +1. And it's okay if you don't, right? But I think it's important that you guys make sure that you at least know what the strategies and goals are, right? 2, join an ERG and actively participate, right? I think a lot of us may or may not be involved in ERGs, but do we actually participate? Do we actually curate things that are going on in the ERG, or do we just sit in there and just, sometimes go into every bi-monthly thing that's going on there, right? Think about those as well too, right? Begin promoting inclusive habits within your teams, which I think is very, very important, right? Not all of us are in the D&I space. I am not myself, but I think it's important that we start it in our respective teams. So in my case, I'm a technical product manager, and I want to make sure that everybody who is on my team is able to celebrate their own respective religious holidays as well too, right? I don't know everybody's religious holidays, but we want to make sure that we're honoring that and we're making sure that we're cognizant of that throughout my entire team as well too. So start to make your team feel like they can be themselves, and that'll go a long way as well too. Some other takeaways: build your D&I advocates as well too, right? So I think, it's really important for us to be change makers, but it's also just as important for us to have people who catapult us to making greater and grander change as well too. Having these advocates takes, the movement from 0 to 100. So it's really, really important to find them. They're out there. And again, you just have to be vocal and collaborating with them as well too. And then lastly, just taking the time to evaluate if your company can leverage inclusivity in its strategy, right? So I am biased, but I would definitely say that the answer is yes, right? Thinking about whatever product that you guys are building, thinking about whatever you're trying to build and scale as a company, inclusivity will only take you there faster and give you more markets to explore as well too, right? So think about how you guys can leverage inclusivity in your overall strategy. And this is something that your company will ultimately value as well too. All right. And the conclusion. Just some final thoughts. Diversity can only be good for the organization, leaders, and team members. It's only good when you have a diverse team, it's only good for everybody. There's nobody loses, right? So why not get to it now? When you see actions taken by your respective organizations, properly discern if they're inclusive or if it's tokenism, right? Don't just jump and, clap your hands at every single thing that your company is doing, claiming that they're diverse. Use what we've learned here today to discern if it's inclusive or tokenism. Next, we all have a part to play in changing the face of tech. So let's all play it, right? We're all builders here, we're all operators here, we're all individual contributors here. And the fact if we are in the tech space or even pursuing it, we are in places of privilege to pay it forward as well too, right? To make sure that more people that look like us or more people that are diverse can break in as well too. So let's making sure that we play that part. We do have an obligation to do that because at the end of the day, that is the impact that we're trying to make for the future, right? And then lastly, the more that we begin to be proactive in embracing diversity, the faster we'll see changes, right? So we can't just wait until tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm going to take these actions tomorrow, because tomorrow ultimately, will always be a day away, right? So take the action now and you'll start to see the changes. And a shameless plug, I have to plug my organization. I know I'm probably running close on time, but I am the co-founder of Techsgiving, which is a community organization that's focused on providing tools and resources to underrepresented communities. We have a community that extends across the world, from Nigeria to DC, to Atlanta, so on and so forth. And we are focused on building community through tech and tech events like skill building opportunities. We host an annual summit. We also have Tech Talk Tuesdays, where we have people from different backgrounds in the tech space talk about emerging technologies as well too. And we all do this as tech professionals, and we pay it forward to the next generation. As you see here, this is a picture of us at my aunt's school in Nigeria, where we donated over 20 laptops to the students to the school as well too. So I would love if you all can join the community and pay it forward, and you'll probably meet some like-minded individuals as well too. So I'll drop that in the chat. And lastly, I always just like to leave with a quote. There's so much going on in the world, and I feel like it's always just good to end on a positive note. Everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay now, then that means it's not the end. Pretty much means if things are going awry, just keep pushing, because tomorrow's another day and it's another day for things to get better. And I thank you guys for taking the time to listen to me. And now I'm going to listen to you with any questions that you guys have for me.
I'm just here to hop on. Feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat, but I'm also going to launch our post-event survey. We're really so grateful to continue these events and continue learning from one another. Please feel free to think of any questions that you may have. We are running short a little bit on time, but I just wanted to invite you guys to connect with Ayo, please. Like, all the work that he's doing with Techsgiving and Backdoor Tech is really incredible, and really what we're about, trying to get more Black and Brown people into the tech world. Please complete our post-workshop survey, and also know that I'm here. So if you have any suggestions on future topics, know anyone who might want to participate in future topics, please send them my way. We're always looking for folks to join the community. We're really happy that this was one of our largest groups, and we just want to continue to grow and have more and more people benefit from these free workshops. Please save the date. On July 20th, we will be focusing on recruiting with the DEI lens. So if you really want to know how to take these strategies, hire folks and retain folks, next month's workshop is really going to be the workshops for you. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions, and we'll stay on just for the questions. But Julia asks, in your experience, does the definition of diversity vary from organization to organization? For example, which underrepresented groups they may focus on first?
I think that's a really good question. And I think it does vary from organization to organization as well too, right? Because organizations may be based in areas that have a population that doesn't have as many people of color that are based there as well too, right? So we want to make sure from that perspective that wherever you're, the company based, I think that's one of the foundations. Wherever the company is based, it should have a representation of the general population in which it's based as well too. So I think from that perspective, I think that's very, very key, right? It does vary from organization to organization. Two, I think it also depends on the product that you're building as well too, right? I think I didn't touch on this as much as I'd like to, but I think a lot of the ways that we can ensure diversity is by having inclusive products, right? So making sure that your product is, if it's not inclusive, how can we champion people from diverse backgrounds to come and build something that's inclusive as well too? That's one part. And then two, if it is inclusive, how do we ensure that we're using diverse professionals to validate this as well too, right? So I think diversity does change from an organization to organization level. I think the baseline, however, for diversity is just overall inclusivity, and then ultimately general retention and population of your personnel as well too. So two-part answer, yes and no, in short.
Great. Well, if anybody else has any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out directly. We really hope to see you guys all next month. Yeah, and really grateful for everyone to attend. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Okay, great. Everyone is out of the room.
Sorry, do you mind if I take a quick bathroom break real quick?
No,
Sorry.
oh my gosh, that's
I
totally
was
fine.
I was holding
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, go for it. Oh my gosh, yeah, and you were drinking all that water. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.